So you're going to hear a lot of information tonight. Uh, the organizers have tried to present both sides to you, as you see before you. And so tonight's purpose is not to steer you in any direction. It's to make sure that you leave informed, educated, that you can educate other people, because there's a very, very, very important vote coming up on November 7th. You'll go to the polls and you'll vote like any other day that you vote. And this is probably a very, very active crowd, right? So you'll go to the poll, but make sure that you flip your ballot, because on the back, there are a few questions. There are 3 ballot proposals. The one we're talking about tonight is whether or not there shall be a constitutional convention. And the New York State Constitution has language in it that says, every 20 years, the people shall be asked a question as to whether or not they want a constitutional convention. And the framers of our Constitution, our federal Constitution, they got that part right? We have some questions and some concerns about the Electoral College or some other things that exist, right? But that one piece, the people shall be posed the question of whether or not there is a constitutional convention, is properly placed. We enjoy a representative democracy until there are times where we're just overwhelmingly dissatisfied with our state legislature. No offense to that body, I worked in that body, so I do know that body. But this is the opportunity for people to say just how frustrated and dissatisfied they are, whether or not they want to take control and have it in their own hands, decide what's going to be enshrined in the most important document that we have that governs New York. Since 1777, there have only been 9 constitutional questions presented. There have been 9 conventions. And of those conventions, only a handful of them have actually resulted in changes to the Constitution. The last such was 1964, I believe. 67. Thank you. 1967. And there were some remarkable things achieved at that time. You had to remember the history of the country, what was going on at that time. There was a Bill of Rights. There were suffrage provisions put in. People of color got a chance to actually be fully enfranchised, meaning got a chance to really have the right to vote. There were freedom for expression of religion was added to our Constitution. The age for voting was reduced at that time. There were a lot of things put into place at that time. However, it was one bill that was proposed. Nowadays, we call it the Big Ugly, right? When the New York State Legislature puts one big package together and presents it to their body to vote on, and usually they vote yes on it because it has so many important things in it, so many budget items in it, so many things that impact education, so many things that impact our parks, our libraries, our criminal justice, everything you can think of. They put it in this one bill and they call it Big Ugly. Well, they tried that then, but the people, once the convention created this Big Ugly, the people voted it down. They said, no, we're really not satisfied, and we're not going to go for that. We're not going to do it, right? And so here we are, posed again with the question of having a constitutional convention. There are a couple of things that I want to talk to you about, which maybe will inspire you if the question goes up, meaning if people vote yes for it. I've told you about the difficulties in having a convention. If people vote no, simple majority throughout the entire state. If people vote no on November 7th, we don't have a constitutional convention. Nothing left to talk about for another 20 years unless the legislature poses amendments that you can see on the ballot from time to time, right? But a couple of notes of interest, at least I find fascinating. Women and their representation at the Constitutional Convention. has always, 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 women have always been underrepresented, grossly underrepresented. So, right, Cordell, maybe not surprised, right? But that has an impact on the kinds of policy pieces that are discussed. That has an impact on the day-to-day lives of families. Um, One of the issues that the legislature is battling with is the women's 10-point agenda. And there's one piece that keeps getting stuck. That's codifying Roe v. Wade, right? A woman's right to an abortion. And so that could be an issue that will come up at the Constitutional Convention to be enshrined to some degree in our Constitution. Could be, maybe not, right? We have the discussion of parkland that, and they're going to go into all of this stuff in detail probably. I don't want to take up too much of what it is that you're supposed to do and get sidetracked, because I really love this. I'm excited about it. You guys, I hope, get excited about it. I'm excited about it.
I'm excited.
Good. Good. Yes, Constitution, right?
Wow.
Let's go to delegates. I'm sorry, Barry, I'm wrap up right now. So with delegates, the Constitutional Convention would be comprised of 204 delegates, right? There would be 3 delegates elected from each Senate district. This is if it gets voted up. Again, if you leave here today impressed enough or dissatisfied enough to vote up. 204 delegates, 3 elected from each Senate district. They run just like anyone else does run for Senate. They need 1,000 signatures to collect on a petition. They submit that, and with that, they run. They're placed on the ballot, and maybe they win, and they become a delegate. So that's 3 from each district. And then there are 15 that run statewide. And their threshold is a little bit higher of how many petitions they have to get, how many signatures they have to get, and where they have to get them from. Okay. And so those of you who live here in this community would have about 2 or 3 different Senate districts if you were interested in running or interested in supporting a candidate who was running, right? It becomes a regular election process. There's fundraising that happens to run for the office of delegate. Those delegates, if they're successful and they win, they get paid for their time. It is about a 6-month window. They will start April 9th, I believe, and they'll run about 6 months, 4 to 6 months or so, to deliberate and come up with some proposals. The convention has staff members that they hire in order to help them do their work. They get paid the same amount assembly members get paid, right? That number is 79,500. That number is also set by the Constitution, right? And so that might be an issue that comes up if there is a convention. I'm not going to go into the issues. They'll go into the issues that come up. And so, given the fact that women have been woefully underrepresented, and we currently have women woefully underrepresented in our city government, right? These recent elections didn't fare so well for women in different places. If there is, and I'm taking a personal privilege because I have the microphone right now, if there is an opportunity for a constitutional convention and for delegates to run, I would strongly encourage the women of this community and other communities to step forward, be assertive in trying to gain those positions and those seats. So, with that being said, I think I said it enough, and turn it over to process step by step. So November 7th, the ballot proposal would be on the back of your ballot, the con question, right? Flip it over. If there's a yes, then November 6th of next year, 2018, the voters will vote for the delegates. That's the process that I was just explaining. After that, after those delegates are elected, April of 2019, the delegates and the convention opens, and they start their business of hearings, and review, testimony, analysis. They start to deliberate to come up with proposals, and they negotiate. At that point, there's the recommendations are put before the people in the November 2019 election. So again, it'll be on the back of the ballot, likely, right? People will then vote yes for it, simple majority. This really is an exercise, the purest exercise in democracy that one can think of. People vote yes for it if they want it. If they don't, they vote it down. The last vote for constitutional, I believe it was the last, not the last, but in 1977, the question of having a constitutional convention was rejected. 1.6 to 1.1 million people, right? And so that is a relatively small number in relation to the population that we have in New York State. It is critical that we educate one another because this is a very, very, very important period in New York's history. We're all privileged to be a part of it, even if we vote no or you vote yes. Just make sure you vote. Thank you.
Thank you, Janine, so much for that. I'm sorry, Barry. We're going to now move on to the main event with the panelists. We will take one from each side at a time, and then Barry, I'll hand over the mic to Barry to start with the discussions. Each panelist has, I don't want to rush anyone with their viewpoints. We want to give a reasonable time and consideration to everyone to get their time in. I'm going to say 3 minutes, no more than 5 if it need be, if you need that extra time to express yourself. But we will start with a pro, a con, pro, con. And because ladies should always be first.
Actually, we've already discussed. He'll go first.
Oh, all right. Okay. Well, we'll begin with Mr. Al Benninghoff, and then have you gentlemen made your own. Have you coordinated, or do you mind? All right. You'll just. Okay. All right, Mr. Al Benninghoff.
Okay. Hey, everybody. Can I stand? Is that cool? Yeah? All right. I'm feeling the spirit, so I'm going to stand up. Thank you. So, I've been doing this for a while, and I'm a political nerd, I got to admit. So I get excited when it's election season. It's election season, everybody. Because I feel like everybody else starts to pay attention to things that I've been paying attention to for lots of months. And I get to do things like this where I stand up and tell people about it. So thank you for this. For those of you that don't recognize me, so my name's Al Benninghoff, and I have a little bit of a history in Manhattan. I was the president of Manhattan Young Democrats for a while, where we did a whole bunch of stuff. Thank you. We got some people, see? I worked for the New York State Democratic Party for a while. I was the 5th person hired by the Obama campaign in New York. And we did some pretty cool things during that period of time. And I'm back now. And I'm here trying to fight for a constitutional convention because one of the things that I kept running into was this terrible, terrible, broken, and corrupt government that we have, unfortunately. And so this is talk a little bit about some of the statistics and some of the procedures and outline a little bit of the reasons, frankly, that I support the Constitutional Convention and why I think all of you should too. So there have been 30 elected officials at the state level who've gone to jail over the last 10 years. 30. 30 is a lot, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Bad. Most of them have been convicted and have gone to jail, frankly, because we had a really good U.S. attorney, Preet Bharara, who was just prosecuting off a bunch of people.
Good.
Yeah, except that he's been fired by Donald Trump. We don't really have him anymore. Bad, yeah, good, bad. There are a couple of ethics enforcement mechanisms that we have at the state level. None of them really seem to be functioning that well. The state Senate Ethics Committee met for the first time in 8 years this past year. First time in 8 years. The person who was chairing it, I think, was Senator Diane Savino. She had to interrupt Senator, one of the senators who was going off talking, and he had to say, Madam Chair, I got to get this in because I don't know when this committee's going to meet again. 8 years. There's an assembly ethics body, and just recently the person they had appointed to head that, this great superstar ethics person from Colorado who came in and was going to clean up Albany, and she spent about a year in her post and then left. Citing, frankly, and these are her words, not mine, that Albany just doesn't want to change. And there's an element of truth to that. And frankly, that's why we need a constitutional convention. Fundamentally, what a constitutional convention is an acknowledgement that we want to have a meeting. We want to have a meeting of some folks, talk about our Constitution and the problems with it, and recommend changes to us that we then get to vote on. And if we like the changes that they propose, great, we'll say yes to those changes and they'll become our laws. And if we don't like them, then we say no and it won't become our law. Fundamentally, that's democracy.
Right.
Right?
Yes.
Yes, it is.
Right now, that's not what we have. And here's why. I just mentioned 30 elected officials have gone to jail for the last 10 years, and I know, I just beat that drum twice. That's a problem. It's a problem because they got elected in the first place, but it's a problem also because they continue to get elected. That's bad. And it's not that they were ever in jeopardy, but they're elected officials making decisions on our laws, and frankly, a lot of them were convicted because they were corrupt. They were patting their own pockets or steering money to their own families. And that's money that then doesn't come to us, so that we can do things like improve our communities, so that we can do things like make our judicial system more effective or fair, so that we can do things like afford more police officers, or afford more teachers, or afford more of anything, frankly, that we need, that we're not getting enough of right now. It's a problem. But it's a problem that's not going to change, and here's why. The way that our state government is set up is terrible. I just mentioned the ethics enforcement officer that left, but it's terrible in this regard. We have a 98% incumbency rate in New York State. And I just mentioned 30 elected officials who went to jail. Here's another shocking statistic. In New York, an elected official, a state legislator, is more likely to go to jail than they are to lose an election in New York. That's a problem. It's a problem for democracy. Because when things like that start to happen, people start to lose faith that democracy works. And I hear a lot about it. One problem causes another problem, causes another problem. Here's getting to the root of the cause, right? Part of our laws in not only ethics enforcement, but in the financial element of the whole thing, campaign finance reform, which you hear people beat the drum on, but here's the fact of the matter and why it hurts. In New York, an individual is capped on how much they can give to a candidate, right? Sounds fair. Companies can actually give to candidates in New York. Most people don't know that, but they can. They're capped on how much they can give. But here's the weird quirk. An individual is not capped on how many companies they can make. So you can see the problem. An individual can create an infinite number of LLCs and funnel all kinds of money, as long as each individual LLC is giving under the minimum donation, however much they want to an individual candidate. It's a campaign finance donation loophole big enough to drive a truck through.
Yes.